Hey everybody, before we start the show, I wanted to let you know that this episode of Tabletop Babble is brought to you by Hero Forge. Hero Forge offers fully customizable tabletop minis with dozens of fantasy races and thousands of parts to choose from. They have an easy-to-use design tool that lets you build the perfect miniature online using a fully 3D, in-depth character creator right in your web browser. Hero Forge offers custom minis in a variety of materials, including plastic and metal options. And Hero Forge also offers downloadable model files for use with your home 3D printer. Hero Forge is constantly expanding the catalog of customization options. They're adding new parts every week and major features like races and custom posing on a regular basis. And guess what? This holiday season, you can surprise the gamers in your life with a Hero Forge gift card. That's right, this one's coming out a little after the holidays, but you know what? Maybe you're like, oh no, what do I do? I last minute present for my DM. That's right, you can get a Hero Forge gift card. The cards are delivered instantly via email and can be used to purchase minis on the site, both digital and physical. You can click the link in the show notes on our website to grab your gift card today. That's over at don'tsplitthepodcastnetwork.com. But the URL is heroforge.com/#gifts. That's heroforge.com/#gifts to get your gift card. This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. Today on the show, I am chatting with Victoria Rogers. Victoria is a podcaster. She is the GM of the Broadswords. She is also one of the organizing minds behind the Podcasts of series that comes from Wizards of the Coast. She is an amazing storyteller. She is a game designer. She does so many things. I'm going to let her tell you about them. She is just a genius and a delight. So here is my interview with Victoria Rogers. Okay, everybody, now I'm here with one of my favorite people. Victoria, for people who don't know, who are you and what do you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
Well, first off, thank you for saying I'm one of your favorite people. That's very kind of you.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's true. I really love the work that you're doing. We've had a couple interactions where we've talked about game design and podcasting and things and, you know, role-playing games in general. We played some games together. In fact, I now own Super Fight.
Oh, do you?
Because I had so much fun playing it with you and the rest of the Broadswords. So you truly are a person that I very much enjoy hanging out and spending time with.
Well, thank you. Well, my name's Victoria. I am Canadian, and 2 years ago, I started a show called The Broadswords, and we're an all-woman and non-binary D&D actual play podcast. It was totally on a whim. Something to do just for creative fun, and it's kind of picked up. So from there, it's honestly, I don't really understand how I got to be where I am today. But 2 years ago, we started the podcast. It launched October 21st of 2017. And then from there, like 4 or 5 months later, suddenly I'm producing Podcasts of Foes for Wizards of the Coast. And then I was brought on to co-produce and write Podcasts of Waterdeep, and then Podcasts into Avernus. And then I was brought in as a consulting producer for D&D Live 2019. It's been pretty wild. I've ended up on a live show of Hello from the Magic Tavern. We have had so many wonderful people on our show. I've DM'd for Chris Perkins, for heaven's sakes. And now I am the social media coordinator for Renegade Game Studios. Mostly board games. We have a lot of really popular titles in board games. We released 30 games this year alone. And we also have a lot of tabletop RPGs. So like Kids on Bikes, Teens in Space, Overlight, Outbreak, Undead, North Sea Epilogues.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much that I want to talk to you about, because I know you're a huge role playing game enthusiast. You play a lot of D&D, but you also play a lot of other role playing games, which is very cool. But take me all the way back first. When did you first lay hands on a tabletop role playing game, and what was the experience like? Were you a player? Were you a GM? How did it go? What did you play? Give me all the deets.
I was about 10 years old, and my mom brought home the board game Hero Quest.
Yes.
Which is like it's an old school dungeon crawler with minis and a map and everything. My mom was the DM, and us 3 kids were the players.
Yes. Yeah, I love Hero Quest.
Yes. And I really wish I still had a copy, but they're very pricey these days.
They are, yes. Yeah, they truly are. I'm surprised. Maybe we'll see it get, a reprint or something like that.
I would love one, because that game was great.
So, you started when you were young, 10 years old. What made you decide, I think I want to do a podcast? I think I would like to let the world in on my game and see what it sounds like. And, what made you go there?
Well, I think I needed something creative to do. And I'm a very creative person, and I needed a creative hobby. My husband is a musician. He's a drummer. And so he, has regular band practices. So I needed something to do myself. And I thought, hey, I like telling stories, a podcast, and I like playing games. And in a podcast, I can do both of those things. So let's do it. I think I was really inspired by, Taz was a big influence for sure. But also really the real reason is Dice for Brains. Dice for Brains, they're on a bit of a hiatus right now, though they are working on new material. They are a Star Wars, it's Fantasy Flight Games, right? Yeah. The Star Wars universe. And their show is fantastic. And Ross Rockefeller, the producer and GM for that show, I had reached out to him, and he was such a lovely human being, and he spent time with me to go over basic stuff about creating podcasts, and he just made it real for me. Like, I didn't have to be this big celebrity to make a show. I could be anyone. And so it was Dice for Brains who gave me that push.
That's very cool. And it's you hear a lot of stories of established podcasters being willing to give their time and talk to other folks, which I think is great. I had that happen to me when I started this podcast. I reached out to somebody who had been doing interviews like this for a long time, and it is such a helpful thing and such a cool thing to see. And the Broadswords, kind of from the beginning was a smash hit, like you said. A few months in, and you were doing podcasts with Wizards of the Coast. So how did all of that come about?
Oh, geez. I don't know. I have no idea. Yeah, we worked hard, but I really don't know. I think a lot of it is I had just finished, I'd gone back to school for business management, and I had just graduated maybe like 2 months before we started the show. So I took a lot of what I learned from my business diploma, and I mainly my marketing classes. And I really put that together for our show. So 2 months before we even went live, I was live on Twitter, social media, but Twitter mainly, and just made sure that we had a presence on Twitter and that we interacted with people and we were a positive voice. So we had stuff up on Twitter ahead of time to just kind of drum up interest. And we made sure that the 2 weeks leading up to it, we had new content to drop onto social media every day. So like, here's a character portrait. Here is a character backstory. Here is a player. All that kind of information. Again, just to drum up interest. And it worked.
So it did. It definitely did. And, the Broadswords, in addition to having this great marketing, is a great story and is great fun. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the show. And you're the dungeon master for the show, and your crew and how it all meshes together, and sort of what your style is like.
Well, I think what was great about it all is I'm the only person who'd ever actually played Dungeons and Dragons or a role-playing game before.
Oh, very cool.
None of the other broads had, or if they had, it was limited to a single one-shot when they were in high school.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So no one in the cast really had a preconceived idea of what this was. So we were able to just make it up as we went. And I think that really worked for us. For myself as a story, and bringing that together is we talked ahead of time. We said, okay, what's our angle? How are we going to approach this? There are a lot of Dungeons and Dragons actual play out there. So how are we going to stand out? I mean, other than the fact that we're all women, non-binary. But there are other all-women non-binary shows out there. So
Sure. Yeah, we have 2 on this network. Yeah.
There's lots of them out there. And so how do we stand out from that? And so we decided from the get-go that we were going to play from an intersectional feminist perspective. And we discussed what that meant to us. We discussed how we would portray that and how we wanted to model it as opposed to be pedantic. That helped us give a firm grounding of what our angle was, what our perspective was, what that lens was. And so that also told us how we were going to tell the story and how we were going to behave within that story. So I think that really helped to set the tone. And then from there, of course, when I started going through all of the old supplements, I came across a whole chapter on Rashomon, and I thought, oh, this is perfect. It's a matriarch. we're gonna set it here. This is like perfect for our angle. And Rashomon, just kind of reading up about that setting, it really just set the tone for the story. Because I like the environment. For me as a DM, I like an environment to tell me what kind of story we're going to tell. Because the environment has all of that information. It has the culture, it has the geography, it has the terrain. All of that will tell me what kind of stories are going to be told within this society. So they're all about spirits and witches and barbarians and very Norse. So that told me, okay, this is the kind of story we're going to tell. It's going to be very divine. It's going to have a lot of ghosts and things that go bump in the night.
Yeah, it's very cool because a lot of the 5th edition books will say, X person you meet in this Sword Coast adventure is Rashimi, right? But to listen to the podcast and have context for what that means, one, it's a fun way to sort of explore Rashomon and the culture that's there. But 2, it's just interesting in general to kind of find that out and be like, oh, okay, so when we say that someone is Rashemi, this is what it means, and this is where they're from. That is just super great to see. So you have mentioned, you've had a lot of great guests on your podcast. Shall we discuss what it's like to have Travis McElroy on the podcast? Because, like you said, so Travis McElroy, for people who don't know, is a player in the Adventure Zone. He's now the current GM for their campaign. What was that like to have someone who is a show that was one of your influences and inspiration now be on your show?
So we had a lot of screaming and panicking. Yeah, so that was fun. So what I had done is I had handwritten letters to each of the McElroys, and sent them to their PO box, like telling them, I really like your show and thank you for being inclusive. We have started a show and you helped influence it, and this is how we're playing the game, and this is what our goals are with our show. Would you like to be a guest? And Travis responded a couple months later. So then within 1 week, he was recording with us. So it was all very last minute because he was going to be traveling. Actually, he was going to Stream of Many Eyes. So yeah, we were all freaking out about it. It was a lot of yelling and screaming and jumping up and down. And then that terrifying, oh my goodness gracious, can we do this? And then, he showed up. He was very kind. He showed us some stuff that fans made for him. Yeah, and then we role played and we did it. And then he offered, I will come back and be on your show anytime. I went, oh, wow. Well, thank you very much. So then we brought him back with Adil Rafai of Hello from the Magic Tavern for our season 1 finale episodes. And that was all recorded, just the 3 of us, within 20 minutes. It was super fast, super professional. And then off we went to our respective days. And I was able to take that material and stick it in different spots of the 3-parter.
Wow, that's very fun and just a very cool story. And again, one of those stories that goes to show that everybody is worth asking, worth talking to, and now you're a D&D baller, so very cool. But so one of the things that I think is great about you all is you also play a lot of other games. When we first met at a Catacon last Acadecon, you were going to record, I think, Night Witches?
It was The Watch.
Oh, right, The Watch. Yes, you were going to record The Watch. And then you came back and you were like, oh, we all cried. It was amazing. And I was like, oh, this is very cool, because a lot of times when you meet people who have a D&D podcast, podcasts are a lot of work, right? Learning the rules for one role-playing game is a lot of work, so I don't certainly look down on or begrudge anyone just wanting to learn D&D and stick with that system. But it's always cool to meet somebody else who wants to get into the weeds about other role-playing games and systems and things like that. So I was wondering if you could talk with me about some of your favorite role-playing game systems outside of D&D.
Yeah. So first of all, I love telling stories, and D&D is great. D&D is a wonderful system, but it's only really good for a certain set of stories, and that is fine. That's okay. That's what it's intended for. So I like to explore other kinds of stories. So some of my favorites are The Watch. I love that game. It is powered by the Apocalypse game, so that system is like a D6 system. It's a lot more narrative based in comparison to D&D. And what I also really like about The Watch is player agency is put into the mechanics of the game. So, and it's like player agency and safety, which I love. So in a Powered by the Apocalypse game, if you've never played one, there are complications, and they really try to focus on failing forward. So yeah, sure, you can achieve this, but at a cost is how that works. And there are often complications if you roll certain numbers. Usually if you roll between a 7 and 9, you succeed, but there's a complication to it. And what they have in those complications is the GM doesn't choose the complication, the player does, from a list of complications. So this gives players the agency to decide how dramatic they want to go, how emotional they want to go, or even do they want to face character death? And that is on the player. And it's not on an external force such as the GM, which I really like.
Yes.
About that game.
Yes. Yeah, that is very cool. And, so Powered by the Apocalypse has a lot of what you're talking about, the sort of narrative consequences and failing forward. And sometimes, many games putting those decisions on the players, which I think I find when a lot of people play other role-playing games, especially when they put more narrative power in the players' hands, then those players come back to D&D with a new perspective and are often like contributing more to the narrative of the story and okay with things like putting their character in the risk of death and that kind of thing. Hey everyone, we're going to take a quick break and then back to the babble. Hey, I'm James Introcaso, and that creepy music means you're listening to a new ad for DSPN's new Dungeons & Dragons actual play, The Demon Plague. I am the DM for Rudy Basso, Lauren Urban, TK Johnson, and Robert Aducci as they bring their characters through a dark fantasy world. I wrote this adventure with John Four, and now you can listen to us play through this adventure on the podcasting app of your choice, or you can watch us on YouTube or Twitch. You can find out more about the Demon Plague at don'tsplitthepodcastnetwork.com. Let's get back to the babble. I would love to talk with you about safety tools too, because I think those come up a lot and we talk about them and we talk about, how they are a great thing to include in your game. But I was wondering if you could talk about why. I feel like so often we talk about the why from the perspective of people should feel safe while they're playing a game, which is 100% a number one great reason. But the other reason that I'm thinking of is like they also allow you to go there. They create a system where everybody has permission to talk about these things, and so you're not wondering during a game like, I don't know that I can go here or not, and so I won't. So I'm just wondering if you could talk to me about the benefit of safety tools, I guess is the short way of my very long-winded response.
Well, you already said it. It's everyone can be safe at the table, but it's also setting the tone of the game. Session 0. Let's start with that.
Yes.
How about?
Yes. Let's start there.
So session 0 is session 0. Yeah. So character creation, and the DM can tell you about this is where we're playing from, like the setting. This is what country are, and let's say we're talking D&D. We'd be like, okay, we are going to be on the Sword Coast. So we all know, okay, so we're dealing with like Baldur's Gate or Waterdeep and Neverfall and all that kind of stuff. So, all right. So we know what kind of feeling, what kind of vibe we're going to get from there. But now we're going to discuss, it's going to be an urban story. Okay, well, that changes the tone already. This is an urban. Now, are we playing a political game? Are we playing a burglary kind of game, like a heist game? What kind of urban setting are we doing it? Because those themes or those tones are going to bring up different topics. So if we're going to be playing a backstreet heist, well, how dirty are we going to get? And when I mean by dirty, what alignments are we going to be playing from? How much mischief are we going to be playing? And that in and of itself could then bring up concerns. So, a lot of bad stuff can happen in a city. Well, if you have a player who unfortunately has dealt with those bad things in real life, they might not be willing to, play that out. That isn't something that they enjoy. They don't think it's fun, and they'll be very uncomfortable at the table if that comes up. So what a safety tool can do is it allows everyone at session 0 to go over those possibilities of topics and subject matter that might come up and that they don't want to see. So one of the most common ones is the X card, which is great. I personally don't like it. but it's better than nothing. And I'll go into why I don't like it, but really it's because it's simply a negative thing. It's just okay, I'm uncomfortable. We got to stop this. We have to redirect this scene. And the onus sits on the person who feels uncomfortable. But the thing is people who are uncomfortable don't always feel comfortable stating that they feel uncomfortable. And that's why I don't like the X card, because the onus is on that person. So then we get to lines and veils, which is a step up from the X card. And I include this in all of my games. So a line is something that you just simply don't want to see in a game. And it's just a topic that makes you uncomfortable. And the most important thing about it is no questions asked. Everyone at the table just accepts, okay, this person doesn't like it. We accept that and we respect that. We won't put that into our game. And then a veil is something that you don't mind as a theme or a topic that it shows up in the game. However, you would like to, fade to black or, just not go into detail about it. A very common one I come across is torture. Okay, if you want to torture the goblin, go ahead, but we don't need to go into detail about how you go about that. That's a good one, and I really like that one because now everyone has tools and a list of topics from the get-go of what to avoid. Everyone is on the same page. Now, you might come across something that you had no idea that you did not like. For instance, I have recently come to terms with the fact that I need a veil on saliva. I don't like it when people go into great detail about saliva. I learned this the hard way until I was gagging at the table.
Sure.
And,
honestly, never come up in one of my games in 20 plus years of role-playing games. So I understand.
Content warning saliva. We were playing Saltmarsh and we were in our tavern that we made up, and I completely forget the name of it, but that's not relevant anyway. But there was a drink that some of the sailors liked to drink because it was only 1 copper per drink, and it was the dregs of everyone else's drinks that they just compiled.
Oh, gotcha. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So jokes were made, of course. And I was like, we can have this drink in the game, but how about we don't go into detail?
Sure.
This
Yes.
really
yeah.
nasty.
Oh, wow. It's funny. I don't even it's making me feel ill thinking about that.
Yeah, it's gross. So I learned I don't like saliva being referenced in games. So that is now one of my veils. And that's okay. If you come across something in a game that you immediately go, oh, it's okay to add that in afterwards. So how I like to signify that in games is what I think is better than the X card is the traffic light system. The traffic light system is exactly what you think of it is you have something on the table that is red, yellow, and green, like one of each. And so let's start with the green. The green is, I'm okay. I'm having a great time. And you just pick that up when you're role playing, but say your character is really angry, but you yourself as a player, you are completely fine. You're just into the role play. So you just pick up that green thing to let everyone else know, I'm fine. I'm having a grand old time. I'm good. I'm just role playing. And this adds a positive element. And it also lets everyone else know if someone is okay. And then what I also like to do, especially if I'm playing games online, so everyone has their respective colors, and then everyone in chorus picks up the green to say, okay, I'm cool too, and I'm glad you're okay. Just to say, hi, yeah, I get it. I recognize your insertion, but it doesn't break the flow of the game. You're just holding up a color. Yellow signifies, okay, we're getting close to Veil territory. So I'm cool with this, but let's, fade to black or redirect soon. And again, everyone has a list of lines and veils. So if you don't have to be that person that added that line or veil to the game. It's just we all know that that's there. So if something in the game is starting to go towards that one of those, you can just pick it up and say, okay, we're getting to this stage here. Let's redirect the scene. And again, we do that so that it doesn't break the flow of the scene. Just everyone's on the same page. And it doesn't fall, the onus doesn't fall on that one person who feels uncomfortable. And then the red item is for, all right, no, we got to stop here. We've crossed lines and we need to back up and restart. And again, I like to have it so that everyone has those colors by them and everyone can respond and everyone can communicate with them. And that way, again, it's not all on the person who's uncomfortable. Everyone is participant in it.
Yes, which is that is a great way to do things, right? Because it is hard to come forward, especially when there's that concern of like, well, I don't want to be the one to ruin my friend's fun, I think is sometimes you hear people say. And so that is a great system. It's great to see safety tools evolving from the X card and that kind of thing. I remember when I first heard about the X card, it was big news. And then people were like, well, how about lines and veils? And, how about this traffic light system? And so it has become interesting because I have seen as a result, one of the things that I've learned is like, one, there are things that I never knew would be a problem for some people that are a problem. And I'm glad to know it. I want my friends to have a good time.
Yeah. And I think it's also helpful at cons.
Oh, yes. Where you don't know anybody. Yeah.
No, you don't know anyone at your table. So you don't know how people will react to anything. So I always like to, when I'm running games at cons, I always like to spend 10 to 15 minutes at the beginning just to go over safety tools and introductions and to go over all of those things.
And then I think the other thing you learn is there are some places people are willing to go that maybe you didn't think they were previously. And that can also be good. If you're running a horror game or an intense, wartime game or something like that, and you realize like, okay, everybody, I want to check in with everybody about this. I want to make sure this is okay. And that's a great thing too about the stoplights and the lines and veils is you have this system that is constantly evolving. And so it's okay for it to change, but it's also a way to check in with people for something that you're not sure about when we didn't necessarily have the tools other than saying like, okay, is everybody okay with this? So yeah, it is fascinating. I think these tools not just improve safety, but truly improve the game.
Yeah. It gives people the freedom to go down avenues. Because they have their list of no's, and then they can be like, oh, so then this is okay, and they can really go down that path.
So we got a couple minutes left here, but I wanted to talk with you a little bit about game design. You are not just a super busy podcaster and a super busy person who is working in the games industry full time. You also design stuff. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about game design with me.
Yeah, I've something I've started to dip my toes in, and hopefully in the new year I'll have some stuff out. So yeah, I've been starting to write adventures, and I love a good short adventure. The type of adventure that you can fit in like a 2-hour time period. Those tend to be my favorite. Mainly because, honestly, I do not have the attention span to sit down for a big, long session. I just can't do it. I recently ran a 6-hour session for some friends, and I was exhausted afterwards. I'm like, never again. I can't do that. So, yeah, I've started writing just like 2-hour adventures that I like to go a bit off the beaten path. I'm not a big war gamer, which I know D&D stems from war games, and so traditional D&D is very combat heavy, and I'm not that kind of gamer, to be honest. Combat is my least favorite aspect of D&D. So I like to come up with interesting non-combat adventures, or sure, there might be combat in it, but it takes a different approach than you might anticipate. So those tend to be mine. I really like skill challenges. I think those should be brought back.
Uh-oh, this is the most controversial thing you've said so far.
I know.
But I am in agreement. I'm a 4th edition fan. So you'll get no argument for me on that. But why do you think skill challenges should come back?
Because it gives you something other than combat. And it gives you mechanics, and it gives the DM mechanics to do interesting things. And characters and players can do interesting things. So in the Broadswords, there was an episode where I had everyone participate in a ritual, and I'm working on this to turn into an adventure that's non-Broadswords. It's the type of adventure a GM can put wherever they need it. I wanted everyone to partake in this ritual. But not everyone in the party are spellcasters. So instead, I set up skill challenges almost for this. So to begin with, they all rolled initiative, and I used this to be the order in which they would each perform an aspect of the ritual. And there were DCs, and there were hidden DCs that I had that were based on different things that they had done in the past leading up to this, in preparation for the ritual. And I had multiple outcomes on pass or fails of their die rolls. And so what we did was I had an NPC start the ritual just so that it set it up for everyone. And then they had to choose a skill or a feat that they had, or a spell if they were a spellcaster, but if they were non-casters, a skill or a feat that they had. And they had to come up with a creative way in which to use that as their part of the ritual. So, we had a bard who's like, well, I'm going to use vicious mockery on the spirit because there's a spirit possessing someone, and the whole ritual was to get the spirit out of this person. And I'm going to use vicious mockery on this spirit to get them out of the person. So, okay, you know what? Let's do it. So let's roll and see if that succeeds or fails. And we kind of went along the line for everyone with that. And then based on the amount of successes they had, that told me, or told the story, which ending they would get, essentially. So would they be able to exercise this spirit successfully, completely, without a hitch? That was the hardest one to get, obviously. They had to roll perfectly to get that. I'm not going to just give them that. Or did they? And then I even had it to where there might be character death if they didn't, and that was if they failed the vast majority of them. Luckily for them, they got the second best one. They rolled well. So yeah, so I like to use skill challenges in that way, because then they can do things that are narrative based and further along a plot, but they don't have to just hack and slash their way through it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So that is one of the things that I think is really cool about skill challenges and about what you're describing, is when you have varying degrees of success in an encounter, it makes the encounter more like combat, in the sense that combat has varying degrees of success, right? You can certainly wipe the floor with your enemies. Nobody takes any damage or uses any major resources, and it's like, cool. We feel great. We feel like heroes. Or a lot of times the way most battles go, the player characters survive, but they use the resources that they have to get through them. And granted, there is a lot that is then different about skill challenges and combat. Narratively, the way the flow of everything works. So I certainly understand why you would like one more than the other. But I do think, again, a lot of role-playing games have social intrigue systems or powered by the apocalypse. Combat works the same as pretty much everything else, and it's bringing some of that kind of thing to D&D and to D&D's adventure design. I think it's really intriguing.
Yeah, especially since like 5e, they're trying to be a bit more narrative friendly, storytelling friendly, role play friendly. I think that adds the mechanical aspect as opposed to just flavor aspect of narrative.
Yes. Yeah. Rules often tell a player and a GM, this is how we expect you will interact with this game, right? Rewards train players to play a certain way. And I think writing adventures that reward a certain style of play and a certain and have a certain set of rules also then encourage people to act with that adventure in that way. So it's really very cool. What excites you about game design? What do you really like while you're sitting and designing and writing stuff?
I just like coming up with ideas. And I like storytelling. So this is just another way of telling a story. But what I love about it is I'm just essentially providing the framework for a story. And then other people get to take that and interact with it and change it, because everyone's going to be putting their own stamp on it. And that fascinates me, is this concept that people are going to take my story, my framework of the story, but they're going to reinterpret it. And there are going to be multiple people at a table interpreting it all together. And that's what I love about it, is writing that framework to provide people for an interactive storytelling experience together.
Yes, that is very cool. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me. We're at the end of our time here, but I do hope you'll come back, because I feel like we just scratched the surface of you, and there's so much more to explore with you, Victoria. And you know what? Actually, before we go, one more question. It's a big one. What do you hope to do in the future in this RPG world? I know you got lots of plans, and so you don't need to get too specific if you don't want to. But what else do you want to do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
I would really like to write in the tabletop sphere. A lot of writing and narrative design kind of things. I don't really want to get too heavy into rules and mechanics of things, but the actual writing or coming up with a storyline, that is more along of what I'd like to get into.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I hope that happens because you've got a great brain for stories and for storytelling. I am excited for you to share more of your creations with the world and to see where your storylines and things like that go. In the meantime, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at Mimi Merlot, MIMIMERLOT, or at The Broadswords on any social media platform.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me today on Tabletop Babble. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wow, that was a great interview with Victoria. People, you can support Tabletop Babble financially. I hope this show is worth at least $1 a month to you. And if you can spare that, head on over to patreon.com/Intracasso, where you can support $1 or more a month and help make this show a reality. I will appreciate it so much if you can do that. And if you are doing that, I really appreciate you. It's patreon.com/Intricasso. There's all kinds of rewards there, but the real reward is this show keeps coming on. It keeps happening. So please go check it out. And hey, maybe you're already donating. Thank you so much again for that. Or maybe you can't. Hey, I understand. Thank you for listening. Guess what? There's a way you can help out the show without spending any money. Head on over to iTunes, create a free account, rate us, rate all the other podcasts you love. 5 stars. It would mean so much. If you're listening in Apple Podcasts right now, just open up the app, flip on over to your rating page, boom, 5 stars. You can do it in 15 seconds. And if you leave us a written review, I'll read it out loud here on the show if you leave us 5 stars. That's right. You can make me say anything you want. All right, people, you can find me on Twitter at James Intricasso. That's at JamesIntrocasso. Also, check out my blog, worldbuilderblog.com, for all of the cool game design stuff I'm doing. Tabletop Babble is a show on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. Thanks to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by Battle Bards. Don't forget, RPGs are like sex. Hey everybody, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Tabletop Babble that was brought to you by D&D Beyond. D&D Beyond is the official digital tool set of Dungeons and Dragons. They've got a ton of free content on there. I'm talking about the D&D basic rules that you can use in their character builder for free. I'm talking about articles by James J. Hake. I'm talking about videos by Todd Kenrick. So go check that out. But guess what? The paid account is 110% worth it. I use it all the time when I'm game designing, running a game, or playing a game. It is just super helpful to have all of the information right there at my fingertips. I'm able to search. I'm able to bring up spell descriptions. I'm clicking. I'm spinning all around the internet, and it is amazing. Plus, they're constantly updating and putting new features onto it, and there's pretty much always a sale happening. You can check out more at dndbeyond.com. That's dndbeyond.com, and tell them DSPN sent you.